welcome back to the Echoes podcast. It is my deepest honor to introduce you to this incredible human sitting right here, Ashley. Ashley McHardy, do you like to be?
Ashley McHardy. My business name is Ashley Lauren.
Yeah, Ashley Lauren.
Yeah, which is, I had a bit of a thing around that because my maiden name is something I inherited. My married name, McHardy, is something I adopted, whereas my name, Ashley Lauren, was given to me. So I felt that was my business name. So
cool. I can relate to that. I go by Lillian Adele in my professional alter ego. So
that's exactly right. My civilian name is Ashley McHardy, but
I love that. And so it's such an honor. It's a deep privilege and it's such a gratitude to welcome you into this space and to be able to provide a space and a platform for us to hear your story and for you to share your wisdom and some of your personal journey and professional journey into the world of healing and the world of creative therapies and business and entrepreneurship and women's empowerment and coaching and holistic healing and the full depth and breadth of what that really means to come from a holistic, integrated perspective. Connected with nature, connected with the land, connected with spirit, connected with this kind of incredible cosmic consciousness, but then also completely grounded in reality of how you nourish your body and the landscape of your body and the landscape of your life around you. So it's such a beautiful honor to have you here and to be connecting with you and call you a sister and a friend. And so welcome to the Echoes podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been such an honor to be here and the Echoes podcast and what it represents of the that embodied artful life of conscious living. It's just such a beautiful way of I guess chatting about what we do, and it's hard to kind of pinpoint what we do, but it's that shift of like conscious living, because such a huge portion of my life was unconscious living, autopilot, just operating in spaces where I thought I had to do things or should do things, expectations of culture and society, and just really unconscious. And so when that shift has happened, and it's still developing, it's a whole different way of being. It's a whole different way of operating. And I feel like it's while there's definitely challenging times when you have this awareness and you have these conscious things, I feel like it's more effortless to there's some I
love that. I love it. I think Abraham Hicks would Esther and Jerry Hicks call it the art of allowing, which I really love. It's this, when you can sit in that dharma of your way, it really is this conscious practice of the art of allowing, that easeful surrender of finding the joy, finding what really makes your heart sing and pursuing that, and finding what wildest dreams can flourish from there, in that seeking of the purest essence of who you are. It's magic.
And there's so many different things of like that allowing as well, and just moving through painful spaces, or and I'm finding that I'm aware now of approaching things with curiosity, which is that allowing of like something's coming up, it's really deeply uncomfortable. And instead of sitting in a space of reactionary, it's kind of that response space now of curiosity. And it's like, interesting,
I love that you touch on that, because one of the kind of key themes and threads that I wanted to talk to you about is how deeply embedded your work is in relation to not only your role as a mother and the direct impact that you have with your beautiful daughter Evelyn, but also in your work with young people and how important it is to bring creativity and creative play in whatever form that looks in, and make that available for young people for not only empowerment but stress release, trauma-informed approach, you know. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of your work and how you discovered this realm of, because I know that that's sort of how you've evolved in your business as well, is you've started primarily working a lot with young people.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about some of that evolution and how working with young people has inspired you, and this, how you constantly come back to this beautiful sense of innocence and play and curiosity and wonder.
What an interesting thread to explore. I feel like there'll be so much like clarity coming out of that as I speak into it. So the journey, I guess, started with my own journey as a young, child and adolescent, moving through really difficult spaces, emotional neglect from parents that are doing their very best with the knowledge that they had. But when they say hindsight is 20/20 vision, and you're like, oh, that's why I'm so messed up. So you just kind of, you're like, yeah, I get it. And I know that for me as a child, art was always there. It was already like part of my subconscious processing, where it wasn't actually celebrated as a tool. It was just this, like, I just love art, and my grandmother was, both my grandmothers are super creative, but my mother's mother, I remember always having access to her studio downstairs. She had this art studio. It was much more crafty, but she did everything from floral arranging, painting, and like little crafts. I remember I should pull it up. Like, I have a photo somewhere of a craft market that we went to, and ugly Christmas sweaters, like antlers, and I just remember like the specific smells of these craft markets, and had like this. It's so funny because I grew up in Canada, but eucalyptus was like a big thing there in like the wreaths and the floral arrangements, and like here I am now in Australia with like eucalyptus all around me. So it's like already on the pathway, and just this like distinct eucalyptus smell from my early childhood, which is so interesting. So I know, like, looking back on my childhood, how much I actually utilized art as a tool without fully understanding why. And it was just to process different things and create. And now that I'm trained in, different Zen art therapies and creative therapies, and the mechanics of the what and the why and the how, it just makes so much sense. So when I started, I left my, day-to-day job and, classic case of sort of corporate burnout of not only working so much, but just bored and sort of feeling lost, but unsure why. And, understanding now that I was just basically unconscious living on autopilot. And I started with art because my daughter was only like a year old, and so she was too little to create art. But I had sort of, was on maternity leave, and then went back to work part-time. So I had a lot more spare time to actually get out a couple tentative paintbrushes and paints. And the neighborhood kids around me, the street that we lived on, I think we were the first family. And now it's all families, and they just sort of started finding me, and I was like, oh, your kid's older than my kid. Do you want to come and do some art with me? And it just started on like on my kitchen table. And then someone had said, oh, you should teach art. You're really good at this. And I'm like, oh yeah, haha, oh no, I won't do that. And then someone else said it, and then someone else said it. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I could do. And so I did it, and I started on my kitchen table with neighborhood kids. And then I'll never forget the first time I actually had like a proper client or a proper customer who I didn't know, is a complete stranger that wanted their daughter to come. And she spent like over a year with me, coming to each term, and before they move on to things like gymnastics and everything, but their like early childhood foundation was like that exploration art. And I remember doing you know, a whole journey in itself. But I remember doing some market research with the families that I was on, and even like my followers that weren't active clients but were supporting me through socials and stuff. And I did a little poll on what was most important to them, and was it you know, children having fun, building confidence, or learning technique? And it was always about building confidence and having fun while doing it. Like, I guess that was maybe my style. I never was advertising myself as teaching fine art, because I'm not classically trained, self-taught. But it was all the lessons that I did were always fun and engaging, and had that social concept. So yeah, I did that for a couple years, and then I just sort of moved away from that more. I don't know what else to call it other than the mainstream art, because it was like, we have a term and we have a whole unit that we're doing, and I built entire curriculums on around the world. Like, we went to Asia, we went to North America and South America and Africa, and just the amount of ideas I had, and was able to channel all of that energy to create these incredible
amazing
online
resources.
They're still there. Like, if anyone wants them, they're still there. But it was so creative, but it was also like, it was still sort of part of that same machine of like an end game. Like, it was like, you're going to create this project and it's going to look like this, right? And so I started seeing patterns of kids where, while we are building confidence with art and having fun, there was still like that program that was already developed early ages, where that perfectionist and that self-worth was coming in, and mine's not better than this one. I was like, ooh, a pivot needs to happen. And that's when I think I sort of met you. And I used that sort of mainstream approach of teaching art as a stepping stone to get out of my mundane job that was paying the bills, but it was not filling my soul cup at all. So it was a great way to explore some creativity, but it felt a little bit like the same thing, but packaged up differently, if that makes sense. So that's when I started looking into my own spirituality. What is good spirituality? And that's how it kind of launched into what it is now, which is still working with children, but I'm bringing the family unit in, because the children can come and they can get dropped off and learn all these beautiful tools and things, but if nothing changes in the home, because the parents haven't learned these beautiful tools for creativity and lifestyle,
and understanding the importance and maybe the relevance and impact that it can have,
then it doesn't really change. So I think working with the mothers, and then it kind of, they're the seed planters. It just filters through that. So I do still work with children. I'm seeing a couple siblings at the moment, and other individuals, and it's still there, but it's definitely gone to, we start with a counseling session, and some of them you kind of have to ask a lot of questions to get it out, and then the other ones are like, this is all the things that made me angry this week, and they've got their whole journey, and they're like, you know, in year 3 or whatever, they're already journaling and you know, doing all the things. So, and then we move through that with art practices, and it's not like we're gonna paint a pretty bird today. It's what are you interested in? What mediums do you want to use? And then building techniques on that, because I have, like, I guess I know how to do a lot of things. I'm not a master or anything, but I can get them up to be intuitively creative.
Creative polymath, as I like to say. Multiple passions and interests.
That's right. And it's like a launching pad for them, and it's their own, it's a journey. It's not necessarily like the end game. It's like they're having fun while they're doing it.
Absolutely. And I think that little piece about bringing that spiritual, just even if it's a conversation, into the world of art practice, but then into the world of art practice with children as well, is so important. And it's something that I've seen And something I think is deeply lacking in our Western culture is these kind of sacred creative processes and even rites of passage and processes of initiation that our young people in this world don't really currently experience, and the kind of fragmentation and the detachment that we can experience when we don't feel a sense of belonging in that. Because what I feel through creative processes and cultural practices is it allows us to feel a sense of belonging and connection to ourselves, to each other, and also to the creative consciousness as well. And so maybe you could speak to some of that and some of the work that you're doing with the Aligned Feminine and some of the women there. And I'd love to just hear more about how you're stepping into this role of creative wellness facilitator, but then also like supporting women and particularly mothers in accessing these like deeply, profoundly spiritual, transformational experiences with their young people through creative processes and these kind of spiritual gatherings and sisterhood that you're creating.
Yeah, it's an interesting space to be in at the moment. It's an exciting space to be in at the moment. It doesn't it's not without its challenges, because as you know, as a holistic practitioner, you're sort of in two worlds. Like you're a bridge between sort of two worlds, and it's creating that like accessibility for people and understanding that there's such a beautiful way to, and the reasons why, but it's so intangible as well, and it's hard to kind of explain it. But I feel like what I am doing or what I'm moving through and trying to share is this alignment of the three seats of consciousness, or the three layers of consciousness, if you will. And, you know, coming from a space where I used my head always, it was always my ego, it was always my intellect, and absolutely has a place for it, but it's not separate from our intelligence or our intuition, which is our heart, and our instinct, which is our gut. So it's like the three levels, and they all start with the letter I in this example, which is your intellect, your intuition, and your instinct. So it's like the alignment or the confluence of those three, and they're not separate. And so working with intuition and working with instinct, which usually gets like swept under the rug or silenced, and it happens really early. So it's almost like a rekindling or a reconnection or remembering of that. And it tends to happen with women in their mid-30s to early 40s, when they're you know, maybe childbearing ages or having children. And I feel like having children, I know my motherhood journey is a spiritual journey in itself. And if it wasn't for my daughter, I wouldn't probably have been on this journey. So it's this deeper understanding of the whole person, the whole human. And you know, it's almost like a muscle. Your intuition's like this muscle that you have to constantly kind of build and work at. And I'm very good at being in my head, you know? But I'm not so good at being in my body all the time, and in those really quiet voices of your heart and the values, and those really quiet voices of the gut, where things just aren't sitting right, and am I sitting in misalignment and stuff. So it's just utilizing art. Because I find that before we had words, before we had vocal cords, we had our bodies, we made sounds and music, or we would use art and tools. And so this is like an ancient language that we can literally remember and connect with. And, you know, and many times in trauma responses and stuff, when there are no words, we can use art. And I use a lot of art through subconscious processing of like pinpointing what's actually going on in the nervous system, these subconscious stories that come up. And it's a really gentle way to process and to see different perspectives and ways of seeing. And then the words come, and then you process them. So sometimes you've got to, you know, like there's talk therapy absolutely has a place for it. And I do some of that with counseling, because sometimes we just have to have our story heard, and somebody will hold that space for us. but sometimes you have to reverse it when there are no words, and it's like, okay, we're going to start with art sometimes. And, you're either starting with talk and then you move to art, or you start with art and then you move to talk. It's like this confluence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
they go
the two.
hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. And there's some research around that when you're in creative processes, we're accessing these deeper meditative states and brainwave states that actually give us access to these deeper levels of consciousness, like the alpha, delta, and theta brainwave states. And what that does, not only for the nervous system in and of itself, in terms of activating the relaxation response and deactivating the stress response, but then you're right, it also bypasses these language centers in our brain where we might not, like there may be blocks there, and there may be like, sometimes in our practice, it may not be appropriate for someone to relive their trauma or to verbalize what's going on, or maybe they don't know how to, because their neurons have gone out of their circuitry and they're in a stress response. And so for one, what creative therapies can do is it literally like wakes people out of the stress response and clicks them over into parasympathetic relaxation response. But then, we're also able to express these deep emotional worlds of sometimes pain and suffering and chaos and all the kind of conflicting, competing emotions that we can hold within our bodies simultaneously. And it gives us an outlet. It gives us a way to express that without having to go into the logical circuitry of the mind to put it into words and verbalize what you're experiencing, which is so kind of intangible and unfathomable in the body sometimes.
It's a distinct pattern disruption, really. And I've wrote about this before, this pattern disruption. And if you always go right, you're always turning right, it's that autopilot, right? That subconscious living, or unconscious living rather. And instead of going right, what would happen if you went left instead? Why can't you, instead of talking about it, instead of doing that, like try dancing, moving your body, or try coloring and allowing your monkey brain to rest. Because what comes out of your brain at rest and just this repetitive motion, or even like a crochet, you're just like doing the same thing. I weave baskets and I'm just like, that's when my mind rests. And what drops in, the clarity from that, it's amazing. So it's that intentional pattern disruption when you're ready to take that shift, but you have to be open to it. You have to understand. You don't even need to understand like the why yet, because until you move through it, you're like, oh, I understand why. You just have to be open to it, I think, and an active participant. I love that.
So powerful, and so many ways that you can access that. I love it. It doesn't just have to be painting, because maybe that's intimidating for someone, or maybe dance doesn't quite work for another person, but maybe it's like super the jam of someone.
Absolutely. And there's no like right or wrong way, like there's no wrong pathway to start. Like I know that seeing a blank canvas is super intimidating for me, and I'm like, too hard. But and even I had a lot of resistance around journaling when I started, and I never understood, like it took me like 2 years to finally start journaling. And I get it now. And sometimes I have to do the journal before I can actually do a catharsis artwork that I do, or like tap into that subconscious story, because you need an intention to do that art. And if you don't actually know what's the matter, writing things kind of helps do that. So or even like singing, the activations from a throat chakra, and like speaking your truth, and being, I feel like I learned how to say no like 2 years ago, and it was from exploring my voice in a really vulnerable space. And
absolutely,
it's just so many different creative outlets, and I don't prefer one over the other. There's like a time and place for everything. But knowing as a creative therapies practitioner, I have the awareness of a lot of tools, of course. And so when you're working with a client, it's that real intuitive guidance where you're hearing sort of the needs, and you're sort of starting them like, why don't you try this? And if it's really grating for them, then you kind of shift gears and bring them over here a little bit. It's just like really gently held.
And having like an arsenal of things up your sleeve that you can be like, hey, let's try this thing. If that didn't work, let's try this.
And it's a very often
find something that works for you.
I haven't actually really had nothing that works really. It's usually it usually comes up in conversation of like, oh no, I can't do dance, or oh no, I can't do yoga. And I'm like, well, you can, but we won't start there, you know.
I was actually just going to bring up a conversation around the stories we tell ourselves and the limiting beliefs that we have around, like, my huge thing is dance and singing. You know, I was always a visual artist, and for some reason maybe I was ridiculed when I was young. It has to do with my whole like experience of being witnessed and seen in my body, you know, and because dance can be a very sensual thing too, you know, and so that whole like being perceived as being seen and all that around my perception of my beauty and all that stuff. But then like what I think is the beauty of what these tools can give us access to is when we kind of lean into those fear boundaries, what we can release and what we can access by going there. And leaning into those like things where we have the stories, like, no, I can't sing. What about if I just go and sing? Or like a friend of mine just dear friend of mine just started doing comedy, you know, and like the kind of the courage and the bravery that takes to like step out of your comfort zone and face that fear. But then what's possible from there is magic. Maybe we could speak to some of that, of like this alignment process of when we go down that route, that path, what's possible in terms of unlocking the limiting beliefs. And
I've experienced quite a lot of that actually. I was thinking of like one day I would love to write some sort of guidebook of just my own experience, like kind of like a reflection on. And of course it depends on the practitioner. Like you can see a sound healer, but there's like thousands, literally thousands. So it depends on the space and the intention you're on that day. But just like a little guide of what to sort of expect in a space like that, because it's so overwhelming sometimes when you start on this holistic path and there's so many different beautiful practitioners that you're like, where do I start? And I remember the first time I went to an ecstatic dance and I'm over a year sober now, and it's such an interesting journey I've had with that alone, because I literally went to wine school. Like I'm a wine sommelier. I spent 20 years in working in sort of the hospitality, upmarket events and VIPs, and writing wine lists and wine pairings, and you know, even like consulting, things like that. And so wine was a big part of my life. And when my body just began to reject wine and reject alcohol, and I would get, you know, really sick in these reactions. So I finally, you know, listened and said, no, I'm not going to drink any longer. And it's such a cultural thing, even in Canada. It's a cultural thing where it's just like, that's what you do when you're socialized. But I feel like it's quite more acute in Australia. It's very heavy here.
Culturally strong.
Very culturally strong. And so when I, you know, quit alcohol, like, who am I? You know, what am I going to do without this? And even like moving into a creative space, I was doing paint and sips. But I was trying to upmarket it, doing like wine master classes, which went really well. And I would, you know, pair cheeses and stuff with that and get them to bring their own wine and but kind of consult them on that. And it was really successful. But at the end of the day, it was still the same thing packaged up, because a lot of them just wanted to get drunk and not hear what I had to say, or like, you know, enjoy the artwork and being really present. So I kind of moved out of that space fairly quickly. And that was the bridge of me trying to not drink anymore, but still have a professional career. So it was like this identity crisis that I was having.
You had to rewrite your narrative in a way.
100%. It's like this, like the alchemy and like that magician of like transformation, that hero's journey, right?
Absolutely.
So when the first time I went to ecstatic dance, I just remember laughing because I was so deeply uncomfortable, but it was the first time I'd ever been on a dance floor without a drink in my hand or some sort of like liquid courage in my body. And I'm like, it's so funny because people pay a lot of money to spend money on alcohol so they can get rid of all of their inhibitions to dance like idiots on the dance floor. But we can actually do this here. You can bypass all of that and do it, but it's so deeply like disconcerting. And even when, you know, I remember sitting for the first couple times and just watching, which was, you know, it's all very acceptable. There's no judgment. You can show up however you want. Just listen to like the frequency of the music. And I just remember laughing because it was so incredible to see people who had very clearly been able to get rid of those masks and those stories, and they're dancing through and like ecstatically, like just like the way they were moving their body and the storylines. And I was just in awe that I had gone from this space over into here. And when I was able to finally start moving my body and tell some of my storyline, it felt so good. Like, and I'm still moving through them. Like it's still something that is uncomfortable for me to do. But just finding the right time and the right spaces to intentionally explore that. I'm like, this month I'm ready for this. And other months it looks differently. So
absolutely. We're going through different things at different seasons and different cycles of our life, you know, and different processes and things and even spaces within the body can give us access to all different stories. What's the story you have in your knee, you know? Or like we'll all have a story about a knee somewhere, even though it seems random and abstract right now when I'm saying it. But then if you go in, you'll have a story there somewhere about the knee. And then what's happened up here? You know, what does that mean for you? And there's some really interesting work of Eileen McHardy, who's a sound and vibrational therapist, and she's mapped the human biofield, and she has this very intricate map of like these different parts of our bodies that hold our stories and our traumas, and it's essentially this idea of the body keeps the score. Yeah, right. You know, like we hold all of our experiences and all of our pain and our trauma in our vibrational field as well, in the electromagnetic body. And with tuning forks, this woman has been able to very acutely and very refined mapping of that field, of being able to like locate different, even all the way to like ages. So like sometimes the further out you go and then the closer in you get, tells you the age that something might have happened in your life, right? So very interestingly, like rich. So I love this concept. I think that's really interesting that our bodies hold these codes or stories, and each part of our body has a different story. And to even like uncover those stories, those layers, it's like you can't start at that story, that root. You've got it, like you understand where the root kind of lies sometimes, so you're not really ready to go there yet. Like first you've got to start over here and like peel away those layers and those stories. Like there's always a surface level presenting problem. Like it might be just to lose weight or something. But actually the deeper underlying root cause of the pain and suffering is maybe they don't feel seen. And so they eat and eat and eat, and subconsciously and psychosomatically they want to be seen, you know, or something, you know, and this experience of feeling unworthy, you know, or like we all have them. We all have these stories. And so just being able to kind of like rewrite some of those narratives is really powerful. And like you said, it's like this unraveling process of uncovering the deep layers and like layers and layers of intergenerational and it's really interesting when you think of it from like an electromagnetic perspective, or like say the biology of belief, and like epigenetics is like we have millennia of programming and the deep wounds around like I have the witch wound, you know, and
absolutely
the artist wound, and I think the artist wound and the witch wound are kind of interconnected, because I think arts in those ancient practices were healing us, you know, in that way. And that's why I think we sort of connect to these practices now. So maybe you can talk to me a little bit about some of the work that you're doing with like healing the witch wound, but then also like healing the sister wound, and how we come together in sisterhood in circle, and speak a little bit about some of the work with Divine Feminine and how you're bringing community together to elevate women. Like I think it's so incredible to witness the work that you do, the way you have such a humility in it as well, in being able to elevate others and feature other women and other community and sisters who are doing this incredible work too.
Yeah. I feel like it's coming from my own wounds, to be honest, where, I'm, you know, not being seen and being muted and censored like most of my life. And I think it's a woman wound. There's many layers, many layers. You just reminded me of my own lineage with artistry, and I come from a long line of artists, and I know my great grandfather on my father's side was a sign writer, and that comes from a time when art, it's still not seen as a proper profession, and you know, that's a whole nother conversation of why, but like that comes from a time when that wasn't a respectable profession, and it was the safest way for him to do what he loves to do, but create that like real structured sort of income. And I would just love to be able to see his studio, because I know there would be beautiful paintings, other tinkerings that he would do in his own time that was kind of like from the hidden from the world, you know. And so like I do, it's this absolute in your genetics, like this like this memory right before you even are consciously aware of that. It's like a memory. And the witch wound, absolutely, very strong line of women who were suppressed in our family, and you know, kind of trace that back to about 4 generations and beyond that. And the witch hunt is still very real today. It just shows up in different ways. Again, a whole other conversation of how that shows up. But it's coming from my own wound of people telling me my opinion doesn't matter, or speak when spoken to, all those same, you know, very similar stories that we've all experienced. And it just shows up again and again, over and over and over in my life. And just amplifying other women. I just love it. I just love like seeing women have that aha moment, that realization. I'll never forget mine, and it was a friend of mine that activated me, and you were one of those women as well, that it was kind of like seeds were already planted and you were just like, I'm gonna water this a little bit and it just pops up again. But like you saw that like spark, and there it was. I was ready to receive. And it's, I remember like growing up, I would just hang out with the boys. Like I was a tomboy. I didn't feel comfortable around like all the cool girls and the pretty girls and the popular crowd. I was like an outcast in many ways. I was a weirdo, and like the archetypes of like the anti, you know, basically. And it was really difficult. I feel like, of course, I had to go through that because perhaps I had a lesson I had to learn, but it was a really humbling experience for me, and it gave me so much compassion for the underdog, or for people who I can see are really struggling. I get like emotional thinking about it, but it's like, I can't say that I'm not a judgmental person or I'm not a critical person, because it still creeps up. But most often I have a heart space that can hold a lot, right? And you know, when I think I'm a student of reaction versus respond right now. It's like sometimes we're an emotional being, you know, so like we get into these reactionary modes, and that critical and judgment side come out. But it's like if you just take a breath you're like, oh, this person, like it's not me they're attacking. It's there's something else deeper going on, and you just hold that compassion for them and hear what they're actually trying to say to you. And yeah, just bringing women together. It was hard for me to sit in. I actually don't remember my first women's circle, or how I found it. It just kind of landed when I was ready. And the more I did it, I understood. I was like, oh, I see myself in you and you and you and you and you. And there was no advice given. It was just everyone speaking what's happening for them. And I heard my story in every single one. And that made me realize that we're literally all the same. We just don't speak authentically. And because of the fear that we have. And so when the sister wound thing, it was really difficult for me because I had been scorned by so many other women and sometimes really mean ways, but a lot of the times it was just non-inclusion. Like it just was like this like shift of body weight, kind of like just passive, aggressive,
passive in that way.
And so I don't want that. And it's a fine line to travel, because while I am aware of it, we're all on that similar journey, but it still happens. It still happens even in circles that are very, very much aware. And so it's just being really honest and having those human moments of like, oh my gosh, I was playing victim, or I was doing this, and just really amplifying what's actually happening and coming back into that centeredness and groundness. So when I am supporting other women in this idea of the aligned feminine, was that we can grow together. Well, we're actually creating, it doesn't exist yet. And perhaps it has existed, but it's so far out of our memories that we actually don't know what to do. And so getting out of this like triangular patriarchy, where we're now like in the circle.
I love the motif of the circle.
People together. Like we all grow together. We're all equal. And like where the master is teaching a student, the teacher is teaching the master in some area, like we can learn from each other in so many ways. And there's like these mirrors everywhere. So once you have that understanding, you can hold space for a lot more compassion in differences of opinions and energies. And it doesn't make it easy sometimes, but it's this creating what doesn't quite exist. And I do see other women groups getting together, and it's incredible to see, but it's a very different structure as well, because I do see some that are still in that very masculine structure of hustle, and we drink together and we get drunk together, and this is what we're going to build our Fortune 500 companies. But I'm not saying that's wrong, because it's great that they're building a community, and that's how they're moving through their journey and their experience. But it's a space that I've moved out of, because I've operated in masculinity my whole life. And I don't still quite know what femininity is. What is femininity? So the aligned feminine is this understanding of we have divine masculine and feminine energies within all of us. And it's kind of creating that balance. And so by connecting with other women who are doing incredible things, and I can learn so much from, I'm like actually being a student while I'm holding space for this community. So it's like, I was going to love to mention this idea around mentorship, and this, like when you sit in this role of a mentor with someone, and you do this so beautifully with your clients, is it becomes this like mutually beneficial, reciprocal, beautiful cohesion that's kind of this collaborative approach. And I think Charles Eisenstein talks about reframing away from this like hustle, competitive, like dog-eat-dog approach to this collaborative approach where we can actually all, like, it's a concept of mutual aid, where we'll just give what we have, and because we know that it's going to be mutually received again when we need it,
And so I absolutely love that. And you do that so beautifully with your business and with the way that you mentor people, but then sit in the listening with people to allow them to shine and be a mentor for you as well. And it's so beautiful. And yeah, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how that archetype sits for you in your life as a mentor, and how you've been able to see other women in particular come into this like leadership and thriving and flourishing.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on the word mentor. I feel like it still has a place, absolutely, but I also feel like you've got to be ready to receive that intentional mentorship. And a mentor can be anything. It can be a person, it can be a book, it can be a podcast, it could be even a documentary. Like it could be anything that you're willing to receive. The problem that I have with the word mentor, which is this like recent sort of musing that I'm sort of pondering, is that it can be really triggering for some people because it's like, well, you're a mentor, like how who are you? Do you know more than I do? And it automatically, when that person
alienates some people
right away, it's like this straight away hard no, like I don't want this. So it's almost like it's more of like a guide or like a transformational ally, or you know, and it's a co-pilot, right? And I remember when I was working with you and I was receiving so much and I was like, I'm not paying you enough. Like, are you sure this is okay? And I was just like flabbergasted by the amount of, you know, exponential growth I was experiencing, and so quick, but I was so willing to receive and do that work, right? Like I was on that pathway. And
that's a huge part of mentorship, is the person has to be ready to do what's involved to hear the mentorship.
That's right. Absolutely. And I think that's why that word mentor, you know, it's appropriate in those circumstances. But as broadcasting as I'm a mentor, you have to be really specific who you're speaking to, I suppose. And that's a lesson that I'm sort of moving through at the moment. Those like sticky bits, but and I just remember you saying is that you kept reassuring me that I'm getting out just as much as you are, because, and I get it now that I have my own clients, is because you know, they provide me actionable tasks, and like, oh, I've got to research this, or you know, and I'm a student of what their experience, and I'm like, oh, wow, I've never, you know, considered that perspective, or I've never thought of it this way. And it's just such a beautiful co-creation. And I find that I can't take multiple clients. I literally will work with one or two people at a time, and I don't do it to create like exponential wealth. Like I'm not getting rich from this kind of work. It's just so beautiful for me to really have that deep connection with those people who find me, you know, like who are willing to say yes to all the noise and all the things that are going on. And there's hundreds of thousands of coaches and mentors, and it's like the people that find me, it's like, oh my gosh, of course I want to be present with you.
And it's when it's a vibrational match, like I often call it your soul clients. When you find the person that has the exact unique vibrational frequency and set of stories that align with your unique frequency and set of stories, that you can help them with exactly what it is that they're going through in that moment. And it's this alignment, which is why I love this word, because it's energetic. It's frequency. It's a resonance when you have a resonance with someone like that.
I love that. This resonance and the frequency, and so many beautiful musings just around that, and you know, where that shows up and how it shows up, and you know, magnetism and polarities. I just wrote about magnetism and polarities and my experience with it, and I've had such an epic like experience with magnetism recently.
I think it's powerful. Like I do magnetic movement meditation because I actually genuinely believe we're connected to the electromagnetic frequencies, and we're like finely attuned antenna. And when we sit in the listening, in those deep meditation states, in the listening of that language and landscape of what's going in, and those like subtle whispers, I think you said that before, when you give yourself the time to listen, you're actually connecting in with the electromagnetic frequency. My sister and I, for those not on the thing, I have an identical sister, and we joke. I always say that I control the weather, and that I can make the lightning and the control. And she jokes because she's my identical sister who's 12 minutes older than me, and she chuckles and she's like, no, it's really me who controls the weather because I control you. So she's like, I'm controlling the weather because I'm like the younger sister, the copycat sister. I'm like, anyway. Tangent. Sorry.
Oh no,
magnetic.
Yeah. And what an interesting. I have a brother, and I don't have a twin. I didn't share a womb with one, let alone two
triplets,
two other people. So like, the magnetism within that, connection would be.
That's a whole thing.
Yeah, but that's all you know. Like you don't know any other way, right? So I can only imagine that. The energetics of that.
It's super powerful. It's a really potent bond. Like the level of intimacy that we share on that deep subconscious level. It's like we dream fasted together for 9 months in a womb. And I also think, and we talk about this, we've shared multiple lives together, and which is why we've incarnated in this life again together. But it's so powerful and like sacred in that way. And I think it's definitely given me access to this experience of reality that's that deep level of appreciation of like the oneness of all reality. We are actually all one. We're all connected. And we actually all have the capacity to connect on that level.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the vibrational field.
Absolutely.
It's just that we were lucky enough to have that since birth because we happen to share a womb and we happen to grow and live and share everything together. But people have access to that energetically in their lives at any stage, and you feel that.
I feel that. I feel like that resonance again and that frequency. And I'm just like having conversations with certain people, and it's almost like I don't really know someone, but you'll get in conversations and you quickly realize like, this is such an exciting thing, and you're like finishing each other's sentences, and you're thinking exactly the same thing. And it's like, I've never met this person, and having these conversations, how does that happen? And it's a vibrational frequency, where you're on this like level, the same level. So magnetism, that's been a big story for me lately, and experience, because I had it about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now, actually 3 years ago. I had a real experience, acute experience that I was moving through actually when I was working with you, was this polarizing energy of this like deeply triggering and this like repeated trigger over and over, and I had to move through that. And then I just recently had the opposite of that, this like deeply pulling energy of like almost triggering, because it was so magnetic. Activating. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here, and so lots of it. I feel like I wasn't ready to have the magnet lesson until I received and moved through the polarizing lesson. So interesting. It's
sometimes the crisis or the trauma or the pain, whatever, and I say trauma in sort of all aspects of the word, the rupture, that's what, like, the getting off kilter is what kind of provokes us to come back to swing the other way, So it is.
It's that alignment. It's an alignment process. Like you're going from one side of the spectrum to the other, and to find that equilibrium in between. And you're like, I'm so incredibly grateful for experiencing both of those. As uncomfortable both of them have been, because even though there's one's really light, so you can look at it as like a light or a positive magnetism, or you can look at it as like the polarizing, really triggering and negative. But they were both deeply uncomfortable for different reasons, and finding that equilibrium between it, and that understanding of what's actually happening when you cross paths with people, and I'm really triggered by this person, or I'm really magnetized by this person, and understanding what it means. And
a little layer further than that I love, that Dan and Sarah, from the guys from Yes End Festival, have been doing some work with them, and they do integral coaching, so they do integral stages of development, and they talk about duality a lot. I think they have this course called Unity and Duality, and they do this exercise. It's like a somatic exercise where you put a line on the ground and you stand at one end of the line. They tell you to stand at one end of the line and look ahead out onto the other line. You can see the other end of the polarity right there. and you're standing here, and they're just like, experience what that is like to experience the other end of the line from where you are. And then they say, okay, and then go and walk to the other end of the line, stand there, experience what it's like to be at the other end of the line. And then essentially the deconstruction of that is this realization or epiphany that even though they're two opposite ends of the spectrum, they're still part of the same line. And that's like a representation of the universe, is that even though the polarity exists and we can still experience the discomfort of what that might be like to experience the polarity, but it's all part of the same oneness of all reality. So there's a kind of relinquishing or a releasing there when you can realize that, or when you have an embodied awareness of that experience. It's like, oh, it's all just another little piece of the fragment of the diamond, of the fractal from that side, you know, but we're all here as a diamond, you know, we are all here together as part of the same universe, and it's just another lens from which we view.
And that's true. Like the lens is like those opinions, right? Like everyone has an opinion, and I've spoken about this recently with some other friends of like, we all have opinions, but we all have a heart as well. And like if we're connecting with that heart space, we can actually be part of that oneness and that wholeness. Whereas we're like stuck in that opinion, and you can't really see outside or left or right or down that tunnel or further, you know, behind or wherever. It can be really stagnating. And one experience, or like a beautiful analogy, is when I was sitting in a singing circle and in a very vulnerable space, and you know, you start out real slow and quiet, you know, you don't want to be heard, you don't want to be seen. And then you find your voice, but then you can hear like other people around the room, their voices are cracking, or there's a bit wonkiness happening. But after a few moments of people all just finally finding their voice, and they're all different frequencies, they're all different tones, that harmonizing line happens, right? And it's just like full body goosebumps. And the harmony that is created with all of these different multifaceted tones, and not just, you know, within nature of sound and frequency nature, that is like, we all have different sounds, we all have different opinions, we all have different lenses and perspectives, but we can still create harmony because we actually need all of that to create harmony. So when you're like up at that, you know, I don't want to say up at, but when you're in that level of awareness, after going through these journeys, like you can hold more space for that compassion and wholeness and and I guess that's like, you know, alignment and holistic living and embodied art. I feel like everything is art. The way you have conversation is art. The way you cook your food is art. The way you create is art. The way you make love is art. Like you can, how many of us can actually say that they play by making love? Because there's so much shame stories, and there's so many, well, you've got to do it this way. It's so, you know, if everything is art, it's like that harmonizing.
And finding like that play and the curiosity and the kind of innocence and wonder that comes through the creative process that unifies us, because we get to step back into the inner child. You know, we get to access that little Lily inside. That's just like, I love flowers.
And I just think it's just so, you know, so beautiful being a mother and like having a 6-year-old and just being able to, like, I was real serious when I had her and completely disconnected from my inner child and blinded by that. And she's really awakened me into my spirituality of connecting with that play. And I often say that I think actually my website says I am a student of curiosity right now, because it's like I have first awakened to that curiosity, and now everything is curiosity. Like even when I'm like really angry or really uncomfortable, I'm like, interesting, you know?
Exactly.
And it's just like so much, and it's that like it's an alignment process, really. Just cool. Okay, this is what's happening right now.
Absolutely. I recently read another book called Busting Loose from the Money Game. I can't remember the author. Robert someone, I think, anyway, and he talks about the quantum field, and it's specifically around deprogramming our money stories, but you can apply it to all areas of your life, of course. And so essentially it's based on this premise that everything we experience in this physical reality comes through our own consciousness. It comes through our own lens and perspective of reality. So everything's really just an illusion. It's just what we perceive to be going on, right? And so it's like this yogic concept of the Maya of reality, the illusion. And so when you realize that, and when you realize that what our consciousness does to make meaning and sense of this kind of crazy chaos quantum field that exists that doesn't compute and make any sense, is we have to create patterns in the field that allow us to sort of recognize or make frame of what it is that we experience in the day-to-day. So we create these patterns. And so that creates the physical world that we experience, but it also creates our realities on that subconscious level, because we have deep patterns of programming around stories that we've been told, and then we learn to tell them to ourselves, and it becomes this subconscious thing. But so what he says is that inherently, like, life is just inherently abundant. Nature, if left to its own devices, will just continue to grow, essentially, you know, or the earth, right? It can just continue to flourish. And so everything that exists, whether we ascribe it a moral value or whether we ascribe it a positive or negative experience, that's just our map of that. That's just our meaning making that we make of that. But everything is there in order for us to grow and evolve. So everything we experience, he says, is this opportunity to reclaim our personal power. Whether we think it's a good or bad experience or not. And so when you can realize that, and he does this sort of, like, he calls it, like, it's this meditation process where you're reclaiming your power, where you find the patterns in the field and you collapse the power that you've given these patterns in the field. And when you start doing this, he's like, oh, you'll see, like, these things just pop into your field of exactly what you need in that moment. And it was so trippy. Like, I was doing this, I'd been listening to it on audiobook and doing this process, driving the car, and I parked my car and drove up into my house and opened up my laptop computer, and we just received a successful grant application that I didn't even apply for. My dad had just done this grant application in the background for this nonprofit that we run, Maracas, and he's a professional grant writer, so he's just sort of, like, every so often grants. But and he's like, it's bizarre when you do this thing, these things will seem to just come to you out of nowhere without any outward effort and action on your part. And this thing happened right then and there. And then the next day, a client just out of the blue gave me a raise, you know, and then it found a new client the next day after that or something. It just, like, energetically, when you collapse the power that we've placed in the patterns that we created in the field, it releases something for you. So it creates new space for us to continue to thrive and flourish. But then it's also like a power that we get to have in realizing that even sometimes the crazy shit we experience, it's there for us for a meaning.
Absolutely. It's like it's happening for us, not to us.
Exactly. I really love that, so I tell everyone about it.
That's so, I'd love to read that.
The name of the author.
Because I'm reading a book I think I spoke to you about called The Anatomy of Spirit, and we're actually moving through spaces of these entanglements and the energy sources that actually draw power from us, from our own personal power. And the financial entanglements, I don't think anyone's immune to that, or maybe some are. I'm certainly not. And seeking approval from others, it's a big one. And that's, I feel like it's a master of disguise, and especially with social media and that, like, dopamine hits that we get from how are they gonna react to that. So that's a big one. Seeking control of situations or of others, and then an ability to forgive past people or situations or even ourselves, and in when we are unable to own part of the shame stories that are, continuing this pattern. So moving out of those and literally collapsing those with intentional. But they're all very entangled in the culture. And so you can't do, like, you kind of have to kind of work with one a little bit and then move away and then work with other. But when you're intentional about it, oh my gosh, the lessons that drop in, they're hot, and, fiery, and
and you just start to see these synchronicities pop up, or things pop into your field that you, like, oh, that's really interesting, you know, why am I seeing that right now, or why is that person there, or and when you're in tune with that, when you get really into the attunement of the resonance of that field that exists beyond the physical matter, we see those more often. We can, and then we're like, oh, I am on my path.
Yes.
Or that's a red flag. Gotta gotta change direction. Go hard and fast. You know, like whatever is the message.
Yeah,
but,
and I say like some of them are like master of disguises because the red flags are not so obvious sometimes, and you have to really kind of experience it, and you come out really disgruntled or really hurt by it, like, oh, I should have thought that one coming.
Like it gives you the whispers of a message, and then I can't remember, someone else described it in this sort of ways. Like at first it's like little whispers, and then it's like shouting, and then it's just like bam, like you're on the back, and it's like crisis. Sometimes we need these traumas or crisis to make the rupture for us to reflect and realize, oh, maybe I was doing the wrong
thing, right? To like really reflect and receive, and then maybe as your, you know, the same lesson can show up multiple times, but in different areas. But you're like, oh, I did it in a whisper this time.
I caught it before before it unravels. Also, I think that's probably like a nice time to wrap up.
I think
We've been yarning for a long time. We can go on multiple tangents, but we've
so many. I had to like stop myself because there's so many other subjects we can explore.
And maybe we have to get you on again, and you can be like a mainstay feature of the Echoes podcast.
Fun, because moving through things all the time, and awareness is good.
Of course. If people have made it to this stage of the conversation and feel that they resonate with you and want to find out more about your work and what you're up to in the world, how can people find you?
My website is probably the best place. I have a few different channels that you can explore.
Your website is
ashley.lauren.com.au. I think it's .au. Ashley Lauren, my name. And I have a Instagram account dedicated to the Aligned Feminine specifically. It's a specific way to write it, so maybe I could throw a link in at the end of the video somewhere. And my art practice, because I'm also an artist, is nurtured by nature, which is another subject we didn't chat about, of like how
of course
nature is my like muse, right? Of everything that I do, the reciprocity lessons of the Aligned Feminine, of this like knowledge sharing, like it's all in nature. And so my art practice is very much either using natural products or fully inspired by nature. So
absolutely, I love that.
Three channels.
We can totally dive into that, and I'm all about this kind of like, again, it comes into the art of conscious living, is how we find our conscious relationship with the land, with our art process as well, because that's a whole conversation.
Like the art is everything I do, the art of counseling, the art of community building, the art of simple art creation. And I just received a spinning wheel that it was a 1975 spinning wheel that I refurbished, and so this week I'm taking a lesson on how to spin wool, which will, you know, being able to customize and eco dye my own wool to create in my looms and knitting and crochet or whatever textile art that I'm creating. It's like next level to be able to customize all of that and just tell some stories, because there's a lot of animal cruelty in the wool industry. So finding ethical wool and having a lot more control over where I'm getting the product and how it's being produced. And just next level of being able to create, and that meditative process of just spinning wool, like just, you know, that repetitive, it's going to be a whole new way of approaching that consciousness and art of living. So
beautiful. And I love the way that you walk with such integrity, and you practice with such integrity in all of your art, in all of your daily habits, your conscious practices that you live in the ceremony of your life, you know. And I love that.
I love that you say it's a ceremony. That's like integrity is actually part of my ikigai, and it's actually it's a really abstract way of looking at it, but it's what can you be paid for in the ikigai, and it's integrity, which is such an intangible thing. But if you show up with that authenticity, it's always going to be the alignment back into that values of what that is. And there's a lot of places and businesses that don't have integrity, but they're still getting paid for it. But it's like it's a fine line. It's a really difficult thing to be on. And so I love that ceremony of integrity, because I am real with myself, and of course I make mistakes. Of course I put my foot in my mouth all the time.
And that's part of being integrous, is acknowledging when you've made mistakes. That's right. Honoring the fault, or honoring that we're not perfect.
That's right. Yeah. And of course, a whole nother subject is like, is it a mistake, or is this just someone's perception?
Exactly. And what is success? What does success mean? Because we place so much value in this monetary realm of success, but anyway, let's get you on again.
Let's stop there.
Thank you. This has been so beautiful. And if anybody's interested, please go and follow Ashley and find her work. If you want to go and join the Aligned Feminine membership, you can find that on her website. Go and connect on all the socials. And if you like the Echoes podcast, you can do all the things, like and follow and subscribe and share it around, and come and join this story, the echoes of the art of conscious living. Thank you.
Bye.